I want to introduce Mark Isaacson. Mark serves the citizens of King County as the director of the King County Water and Land Resources Division. He leads a county-wide natural resource management agency of approximately 350 employees, a $58 million operating budget, and an $89 million capital budget. The Water and Land Resources Division includes programs in stormwater management, agriculture, forestry, restoration, flood control and floodplain management, open space acquisition, and scientific services. He's worked over 30 years in the public and private and nonprofit sectors. Prior to his 20 years at King County, he worked as a city planner in both Washington and California. He has private sector consulting experience as an environmental planner and was an executive director for a nonprofit community advocacy organization in Hawaii. Mark has studied environmental studies and geology at the University of California in Santa Barbara and city planning at California Polytechnic State University in San Luis Obispo. He has a master's in public administration from the University of Washington in Seattle, and I see that he actively enjoys all of the outdoor resources that the Pacific Northwest has to offer. So, Mark?
Good morning. Thank you for the introduction. And I'd like to thank Bob, who just gave you that wonderful presentation. And the interesting thing about what Bob and the Nature Conservancy is doing is that they have broadened the discussion beyond anything that we can do in local or regional government. They are taking it to the extent of to the state legislature and at a statewide level through their organizational prowess, through their organizational understanding of what we need to change our environment to really hand off to our children a sustainable environment. And they are taking that to an elected official group beyond what we can do. Because when people look at somebody like myself as the director of Water and Land Resources Division, though it is an honor and a privilege to serve the people of King County in that position, if I go ask for $50 million for this kind of program, it looks like I'm padding my budget or I'm padding my programs that really want to happen. And that's just not the case. So I really want to give a round of applause to the Nature Conservancy and their leadership of what they do. Thank you. And next, I would like to thank you. It is a profound profession that you have found yourself in today. I suspect that most of you are engineers. Can you raise your hand if you're an engineer? Ah, yes. I am not. And I work with engineers, but I don't actually do the engineering. And actually, I have found that usually when I have a bunch of people together working on a problem, I say, either solve the problem or I'll come in and solve it for you, and that gets them busy. So they solve it pretty quick. But I have to say, I want to relate a little bit of a story that I had talking to my mom. We all have moms and dads. I don't know if in your profession over time you have had those experiences with mom and dad where they go, so what do you do? Now, as engineers, I think you've probably got a nice, profound way of talking about that, and it's really not a problem. But for a guy who does like this, city planning and environmental organization and, this public administration stuff, it's a little vague. But Dad's sitting there going, well, he's not at home sponging off of me. And Mom's sitting there, well, as long as you're happy. So, because of this circle of life and all the issues that happen with that, I had the opportunity to help my mom trans from this stage in life to the next stage in life. She took about 4 months to do that. And she was pretty deep in thought for most of that time. So one time, she's down in California. I went down there a couple months for about 4 months and went there a couple times a month. And she looked at me one day as she was sitting in her favorite chair looking out the window, and I was sitting cross-legged on the floor, and she asked me, so what do you do? I said, well, I began to talk about all my colleagues and associates in the Water and Land Resources Division and the profound work that they do. She was like, well, okay. I talked about our agricultural program, our scientists, and our forestry program, and our stormwater engineers, and all of the like. And she said, oh, that's interesting. And then, that's nice, Mark, okay. She's deep in thought, as a woman would be at that stage in life. And then I started to talk about river and floodplain management. And she asked me to speak more. And I said, well, here's what our ecologists do. Here's what our project managers do. And we have public outreach. And we have engineers who come in and do design on projects. And she looked at me and said, wow, their work is really important. And not being a terribly deeply religious person, but a profoundly spiritual person, she looked at me and said, they're doing God's work. And then she looked at me with those big brown eyes and said, but what do you do? I will never forget that, Mom. Thank you. Here's what I do. Here's what I do. I manage a group of people who do really the interesting work. And the fun part about King County government is we're right in the middle of 1.8 million people. We have ESA issues, not issues, constraints, opportunities, regulatory burden that comes along with that, agricultural, and most important, if I go back a slide, I've added people. We're making room for floods, fish, and people. And so when we have a series of projects within our river system, here in the Northwest, and I don't think it's really any different than anywhere else that you are, people love their rivers. It's their backyard, whether they live there or not, but they use them over time in many, many different ways. Now, I could spend a lot of time bragging about the work that my colleagues do. It's really associated with a wide range of capital construction projects, home elevations, barn elevations, farm pads, which kind of unique, I think, to us a little bit. And then spent a good amount of time during flood season with flood warning and all the different array of ways that we reach that. But we do log quite a bit of hours on natural emergency response. But to the point more about what we're doing here on integrated floodplain design, we have over the last 4 years reconnected about 250 acres of floodplains back to the river system through a number of different projects. And you really can't see that too well on the slide probably, but the different slides, I think the yellow is what we've completed, the red's in process. We have about 3 more projects, over the next 3 years, about another 300 acres coming online to reconnect to the river and floodplain area. And then we have 6 corridor planning projects that are going in to take a look to see how we can leverage the dollars that the Nature Conservancy and their partners are working on, as well as locally derived federal or locally derived dollars. But during these, I would call them corridor planning processes, we want to invest to have more than just one outcome, which people have bought into, if you've heard from Bob. But also there are hard choices to be made. There is no, you can lift every boat all the time and have equal benefit. There are hard choices to be made depending on whether you're looking at the safety, the habitat, or the level of protection elements that you need to make decisions around and have your elected officials do that. Just a couple cool projects that perhaps you might see on your field trips. Rainbow Bend we've done, now this was 72 homes that were removed. We've reconnected 40 acres there. We've removed 900 linear feet. The whole point of this is it can be done. This had some great stories around it because there was a mobile home park there, mostly low-income folks, and we had staff who might not be in the room today, but who are out there actually during flood events taking the elderly women out on their back because they refused to leave. It was a great story. It helped really generate the dollars, and I believe some of the dollars came through the Nature Conservancy work effort to finish that. The Belmondo project here is a project that is important to mention because it is a habitat project through mitigation required to do as we did our projects throughout the river system, and we had to have habitat enhancements on this. It is one of the ways in which we've taken the regulatory component to this and incorporated into here. But you'll also see there's a human element there on the bottom line. That is the recreational safety component. Now, why would I talk to floodplain managers about recreational safety? It is an important part of the culture here. When we go through the river systems in, say, the Cedar River with this, if you drive through their neighborhoods, every garage has an inner tube. And it's there, you have to deal with it, they're out there. And we estimate about 6,700 users of this stretch of river. So what we've done here on the design is, after the ecologist said, you're gonna compromise my design, I had to say, I get that, but we're not gonna have some designs in here that cause people to get hurt. And this is a part of what we have to, and that's not you, we've had to understand, is that when we go in and change the environment to bring it back to its natural systems, God's work, as Mom said, you do own that project, and you do own that facility over time. And it does become a legal and a challenge for you as a manager to deal with. So it's one of our components of this. The Reddington levee setback here, it's about reconnected about 25 acres. The important part about this one really was we protected a city of Auburn, which is one of our major cities in the South County area. 600 structures were protected in the downtown area. The challenge on this one was really a lot of fun discussions around, you really need less rock and more wood. And I had the engineer saying, more wood means more risk. And I'm going, more risk for what? No, we got a major city here. We cannot undercut that. One of the things we find when we work with elected officials is do what you need to do on the local level with that floodplain redesign stuff, but don't put our citizens at risk and understand what that risk is. So we had to make a call on just what that was. No, it's going to have more rock. People understood that if we went too far with too much wood and not enough of the engineering components that needed to be there, and it failed, it would be the last levee setback we ever did. And it wouldn't be a good idea for at least our jobs here. City of Carnation, this is I think my last one that I wanted to talk about. It's a 50-acre reconnection. The City of Carnation was adamantly opposed to this reconnection until we worked with them and they understood what we were after. And really what it took was a long conversations with them about what their residents really wanted. And the residents really wanted was a beach to put in and a beach to take out, and that's what we provided on the recreational component. Again, it is that human part, but it is a fascinating area. It is a great habitat area, and we've got 40 acres reconnected in the City of Carnation. Now I'm going to transition to the things that we've learned. And because I could spend all day bragging about the good work of my colleagues, I don't want to do that. I'd like to pass on just a few lessons as we've gone and done these reconnection projects over time. I think we had 75 constructed projects, not all reconnected. But there's a couple key components of this. And the first one is really this one. Now, why would I pull up a quote from some dude in 1600s? Well, it's important. And it's important because as I was entering this journey a couple years ago with some of the key projects that we were doing, our county executive, who, by the way, is the person who was supposed to be here, but he and his wife just had a baby, so they couldn't. And he said, hey, those are your people, you go talk to them, give them my best, but I'm not going to be there, I'm taking care of the baby, which is really great to see the boss have a baby because he understands when these things are needed. But I was asked to do a certain project for the boss, and I failed. So it wasn't like I was sitting, in the park not paying attention to it, but I did not achieve what I was asked to achieve. So the deputy county executive, Fred Jarrett, called me to his office, and I had a new boss at the time, my immediate supervisor, department director, and I knew her well, but I didn't know her in that role, and so we were kind of in that transition area trying to figure out what's what. And of course I failed on a project that was requested by the county executive. No small deal, so I spent a considerable amount of time trying to figure out how I was going to approach this meeting to explain why and what happened. He never asked. He sat there for a half an hour drilling me on what did I learn. How are you wiser? What would you do different? How was your organization better? He went through a whole series of learning questions that made me sweat. I did not have any answers for any of those. I was entirely unprepared. But I understand now the point is, as an organization, when you're doing work that is not well-defined by manual, well-defined by citizen consensus, well-defined by political consensus, it's not a curb, gutter, and sidewalk replacement. It is an entirely new reconstruction of that river. You will make mistakes, and there's some key things to learn. So here's a project that has a challenging space to it around what we've learned. And I think I missed a slide. Oh, yes, good. No, that slide was there. What I guess I want to point to is this was kind of one of our, well, you can't really see it. If that bridge there has got one of our projects that failed in itself, and its engineering component failed, but also what we've learned on that is that the river will move far more than you may expect. There is no right channel to it. There's no extended period that is limited in your monitoring and your ability to do that maintenance, and you have to understand the triggers for when you're going to go in and intervene and make those. We didn't understand that. That was a project about 5-6 years ago, 7-8 years ago. I'm a lot grayer now. But we've learned and figured out how to move on that. Why would I put this picture up? Well, I'm a father of a 19-year-old kid, and I know that they don't have a lot of brains at that age. Their ability to connect consequence to action is not there. It's an executive functioning skill that is just not there at 19. So here we have, on that same river, we estimated this is the Cedar. We've got roughly 20,000 tubers in King County. This is a component I just have to talk about. These guys, no brains, are on something made for a bed in a bedroom. These guys, one guy is sitting there on a pool toy made for, some 12-year-old, not a 190-pound Hulk, who's sitting there trying to figure out how to get down. And they're all drinking beer. So after 4 or 5 of these beers, they're just not there yet. So what happens? Oh, there's a woman in there who's not drinking a beer but texting. So at least she's, as one colleague who I think is in the room said, she's probably texting, "Where's my beer?" But my point on this is you have to recognize that these are your users. These are your people who you reconnect these areas. This is what engineering needs. There are ways to start to accommodate these. I won't get into that because I've only got 5 minutes left, but it's important to understand. I think Bob really got into some really great discussion about the farm fish flood component to what we're doing. Some of the things that I learned, I will not put this on my colleagues, but I learned, hey, 8 years ago or something, we created Farmpads for you guys. What more do you need? And they were really happy about Farmpads. This is an elevated dirt in the floodplain so that they can put their farm equipment on it. They get that they flood regularly, but it became more than that. It became, no, there is more to agricultural viability than a farm pad. And it became drainage, and it became the ability to not just raise their farm pad, but also raise some of their other equipment. Through active community engagement, we've started to unravel that and figure out really what that onion looks like, unravel that onion, so to speak, and look to see what it is that it takes to have viable agriculture in the area as we do these areas. Now, as we do the reconnection in the agricultural areas. The other mistake I know I made is, in fact, I even put it into some comp plan policy that nobody paid attention to, but it was important in the sense that an acre for an acre was often disguised. If we can replace 1 acre for a project with agricultural land, we're good. Well, you actually can't do that on a project-by-project level. You have to do that on a reach-wide level, and thus the corridor planning becomes incredibly important. This is just a project here where we start to, it also takes not just those community discussions, but the technical work that you have to go into, understand how that river is going to change, the modeling work, and you can see the different lines on the map. There are others better prepared for me to talk than I to talk about it. I think there's a conference proceeding later on that's going to talk about some of this work. But you see the different lines, and this is where we expect the channel to move. Some of the components that we put in there for the farmers, once we realized that they didn't just want barn elevations or farm pads, we put in areas to protect the farm road, and then also to reduce the severe scour and erosion on the agricultural land. These are things that are not done or known without a lot of discussion and the time and investing the time that it takes. Also, we have a system-wide improvement project in here, and what we know now about this is along the Green River. It's a core-sponsored effort. We're doing that. We had a lot of really interesting discussions. Got wrapped around the axle, I think, on a real specific stretch with one of the cities in our Green River. And what we've learned by that is, again, the project by project doesn't work. I'm not necessarily sure that the actual decision from that project by project was necessarily bad, but what we could never answer was how does that project fit within the broader context. And so we have to engage multiple partners and bring them in. And I won't put too terribly much into what that multiple partner project looks like, except it is being spoken to on Thursday. Lauren Reinelt, one of my colleagues here, is going to be speaking to that. So in summary, we've got 3 learnings I'd like to pass on. The obvious, you're human, you're going to make mistakes. As a leader in an organization, you have to allow for that. It's not dumb mistakes, calculated risks that are communicated, and the ability to know that you're challenging complex, both legal, historical, cultural, and then biological and engineering. You bring that all together, it is not just an engineering solution. It is one that takes time to learn from that. 2, obviously, rivers are dynamic. You guys know that. But we have the ability to continue to communicate to our elected officials and the residents the uncertainty for which happens when you do this floodplain reconnection work, or even more traditional redesign of a levee or repair of a levee, because there is always that term that my colleagues have taught me about residual risk. I think one of my biggest challenges with more than one of my elected officials that we work with, I thought everyone was going to stay dry after this project. No, not really. At some level, people are still going to get wet, and we've improved our ability to do that. Oh, by the way, the guy in the middle in the lower left there, that's the guy who just had the baby. And his wife had the baby. So it's really fun. What was good about that is one of our colleagues is surrounded by engineers, ecologists. I think it's a Secret Service kind of guy, driver. But they had a lot of fun going down the river, and we explained to him and took him out there on the river to show them what was going on so that he could understand that. And of course, my colleague there to the right, in the lower right there, this slide is about the educational and outreach work that needs to be done. And finally, learning 3. We have to make room for people in the process. While we all talk about having fish and floods accommodated with our floodplains, we can't really know what that means at the individual level, both to the businesses, the recreation, the homeowners, the elected officials, people who don't live in the floodplain but use it and believe it's part of their backyard. Take the time to listen to that. And I am here to tell you that that takes a lot more resources than I would have historically wanted to put into that. And so finally, I'm just concluding. I don't think I can really make this thing work because I don't have if you hit that button up there in the technology folks, you can see see the diamond right there? Yes, hit that, perfect. These are the people that really do the work. They do the work in our agency. They work with the volunteers, and you can see this will just scroll over time. So I want to honor them. I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for coming to Seattle, and I want to thank you for the great work that you do.